I don't pretend to be Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, so me using PowerPoint is kind of rare, but I'm going to use it in this particular case because it is probably the most efficient way to actually get this kind of information across. Okay, it's probably been about maybe 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, that I was on Bernard Riley. I think I was on a panel with LiLbignate, and we're going back and forth about the ills of the black community. And the ills of the black community go way, way back into how we were created in this country as a class of slaves, as a class of people. And as I work my way through the American Slave Coast, which is a very good book, a very good treatise on how the class of people we call Negro were created. So a lot of ills actually come from that experience. And even the single motherhood that we struggle with comes from that experience. But we're going back and forth, and a lot of blame gets put on the single motherhoodness of the black community, the matriarchal bent or the gynocracy bent that we have in our community. And rightfully so, single motherhood does point to problems, and it does cause problems. I would be remiss to even say that it didn't. But a lot of what black men, especially in this space, do is they have this like myopic focus on black women and black single motherhood. They don't have can't even come close to a holistic view. They blame all the ills of the black community on single motherhood. And they especially say that black single motherhood, or the out of wedlock rate, or the bastard baby rate, whatever you want to call it, is unique amongst black women. And with it being unique amongst black women, it's a special dysfunction in the black community. And I have argued that it's not. And I have argued that, yes, our culture will express certain things differently, but the thing is that this particular problem is structural. It doesn't just exist inside the United States, nor inside the black community at large. It's a structural problem with not only Western countries first, but also with advanced industrial countries. So since LiLbignate had little to no evidence about what he was talking about, which is why they don't want to go outside the black community, because all their talking points are not researched. They're just passed down. They might read an article or two, and then they slap blame on it, and that's the end of the story. That's how come they refuse to look outside of not only the black community and into the wider population, but also outside the country to see if the same effect is happening elsewhere, and why that is. Because I believe that the black single mother rate is actually an effect of the post-industrial environment, and not a singular cause of black culture by itself. So I actually set out to prove this in this video, in this presentation. I'm actually going to run through some of the things that I found, and it's quite interesting. So I'm not going to give a whole preamble about my introduction and theory and stuff like that. We're going to actually go through it as we go along. So without further ado, I actually like this picture. I found this picture online, and I think this pretty much projects the image of black single motherhood. A young woman with 3 babies and no man, or could there be 4 babies and no man? But the thing is that this is probably the face of black single motherhood. So, and this is what we think about when we see it. So the first thing I said is that when we look at the rates of non-marital birth rates by race in the United States, of course, we always look at the 70%. In fact, it peaked up to like 72% just before the recession. It's actually gone back down. In fact, this is only goes through 2014. I think it's below 70% now. So it's like 69%. So it's kind of tailed off. In fact, black single motherhood probably has peaked. But we look at the Native American, which is almost as high as ours, which is quite interesting that the two most oppressed populations in the country, even the two enslaved populations of the country, were actually very similar in their issues. And then the Latino non-marital birth rate, what we think of as very patriarchal society, very machismo culture, is also above 50%. And then the natural age 40, and of course, even though the non-Latino white is it's still low, but look how far it's risen since 1940. The rate has actually gone up about 10 times, because back in the 1940s and 50s, it used to be 10%, or less than like 3%. Now it's at 30%, so it's actually risen faster than anybody else. But actually, nobody notices that. That's what keys people to know that it's structural. The black women might be the canary in the coal mine, but they are no means the cause. And this is something that I actually looked at as a chart just recently, because I always ask people, guess which country has the highest out of wedlock birth rate. And some people will say Norway, Sweden, and always Iceland, because Iceland does have a 66% out of wedlock birth rate. And it's been fairly consistent. But no, everybody's shocked when I say, and I actually show it, say Chile and Costa Rica. Chile up here is 69%. Chile is 69%. Up here, 70% up here. Costa Rica is 69%. Mexico, believe it or not, is 65%. It's supposed to be a machismo culture. Now Sweden has recently been at 60%, and France also has recently got to 60%. But the interesting thing is that what they wanted me to compare is three of the lowest, because they mentioned South Korea at 3% and Japan at 3%. Japan doesn't really count out of wedlock birth rates. And so what I also found out is that the lowest in the EU is Greece. That you would think that France and Greece would be similar, but Greece has a very low out of wedlock birth rate. I think it's like 7 or 8%. I think it's 8% in 2018. I was trying to find an updated version of this, but I couldn't. But look at the Nordic countries. The Nordic countries are well above 50%. Norway, Sweden, France, even down to the UK. The UK used to be below 40%. UK is now at 50% out of wedlock birth rate. So that got me to thinking. When I looked at Greece and saw how low its birth rate was, it made me think of something. But we'll get into that in a minute. As you can see, the United States out of wedlock birth rate is 40%. We showed that. And in 2016, like I said, France, 60%. Sweden in 2016, 56%. Even Spain is almost 50%. So what I wanted to find out was why these countries that are post-industrial, that have a much higher out of wedlock birth rate than the United States, how did it compare to something like Japan or Korea? Because Korea was also mentioned. Now we know that this is a very interesting chart. It's one of the charts I actually love very much. It shows that as you industrialize, as you go along and industrialize, the birth rate, the fertility rate, and the birth rate goes almost geometrically opposite, the opposite direction. So as women get richer and more independent, as your culture gets more independent and more automated, you need less children. Even the black fertility rate, when they counted in 1860, was 8. I do believe there's one that goes back further than that. It counts the black fertility rate is 9 or 12. But you can even see the black fertility rate, which is like a point or two higher than the white fertility rate. Actually, both went down in tandem as the United States got richer. They're almost the same. So as the environment gets better or less hostile, there's less of a need for children. As children survive, there's less of a need to have so many. So the out of wedlock birth rate is also a function of, in my mind, of industrialism and this artificial environment that we actually have that provides safety and comfort. This is something Carol Quigley said back in his book Tragedy and Hope, and it's like a template that I use since I read this book, started reading this book really back 2008, 2009, somewhere around there. And a lot of things that he said actually are basically true. This is a sequence of Western civilization, right? What he said was when the pattern of development, or the sequence of development for Western civilization was the ideology first, weapons second, agriculture came in third, the Industrial Revolution with machines fourth, sanitation and medicine fifth, and then you had a demographic explosion because you have with the agricultural revolution, you have the food to feed them, and also you have the sanitation and medicine to keep them alive. So you get the demographic explosion. And then the revolutions in transportation and communications to actually transmit not only goods, but also ideas. Okay? And what he said is that, say, like in Asia, he used Asia, for instance. Okay? Asia got weapons first, okay, which is out of order. Telecommunications, transportation, telecommunications, because that's what they needed, which is out of order. Then they got sanitation. Then they got the Industrial Revolution. See, then they got the demographic explosion because they could keep more people alive. And then actually feed these people the agricultural revolution. And what he said is this: if you got all 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you change the environment, the cultural environment, this would follow. That would follow. So the best way to look at an industrial sequence or the industrial revolution is actually looking at your demographic cycle, which is your A, which is your primitive society or pre-industrial, your B, which is your demographic explosion, really, where your numbers are rising, higher birth rate, falling death rate, your numbers are rising, whereas in A, both those are high, which is stable. And then your C is your post-industrial, your stable post-industrial, which your birth rate falls, your death rate remains low, but your shape or your population is stabilized. And this is your declining, which is your D, where your birth rate is low. This is your post-industrial, your industrial decline. Your birth rate is low. Your death rate is rising because all these people are old, and your numbers are falling. They call that the geriatric, when your population no longer produces enough children, and you get old. These are the shapes of the pyramids. I'm saying this, I'm showing you all this because this is actually going to be significant later on, from here on out. These are the shape of your pyramid. This is your pre-industrial. That is your industrializing. This is your B phase. This is your population explosion. This is the stationary or post-industrial stationary phase that you have. And then this is the D, the decline, the declining shape that starts to form your snow cone right here. And there's a fifth one that is actually a more aggravated snow cone, like Japan has, as far as shape is concerned. Okay, what I looked at is that we use Sweden. We use a country that has a very high out of wedlock birth rate, and we use South Korea, which has a very low. a very low out of wedlock birth rate. You see, this stabilizes into the C shape, because you notice the almost rounded or square shape that this one takes, like that, which is the one that we saw in the C cycle, and this is the D. This is almost the exaggerated snow cone, where you have a very low birth rate, and as the population gets old, you have a very high death rate at the top, or accelerating birth rate at the top, because your population is getting old. Now, the first one shape we're going to look at is Sweden. The Sweden population. We're going to look at briefly look at their not only pyramid, where you can see how they fill in the bottom with a stabilized birth rate. So to keep they fill it in to keep that snow cone shape from forming. Obviously, they have a lot of people, like almost like 30-40% of their people over 50. So even though there's a smaller portion of young people here that can actually come in and fill in these gaps of working folks, this is what you have. This is what why they try to keep babies being born, to keep it stable. That the goal is to stay stable instead of going into decline. This is Sweden as far as divorce. Just like America, it's gone up because it's industrialized, and even post-industrial. The more post-industrial you get, the more the divorce rates spike. The marriage rates have gone down, just like the United States. The post-industrial rates have gone down. They had a marriage spike, but right after that, it got right back to the same pattern it always has been. And these are the birth rates, just like the United States, since 1920, have been waving down. As you get richer, you get more comfortable, you industrialize, the birth rates start to crash. This is the Korean snow cone. Okay, a population pyramid. Post-industrial. This is definitely a D cycle, even though this has only been, I do believe this really started back in, I think they really started aggressively industrializing in 1960. So this has actually been accelerated. So basically, you can actually go back and see and chart this stuff in real time and see how they try to adjust their population for growth. And this is what they wound up with. You can see since 1960, back in 1960, the fertility rate in a woman was 6. But as they industrialized, because Korea actually industrialized late, down to, you see where they are. They were almost at 1. Now they're below 1. This is without the incentives that the West has given for women to have babies. Even though they're late in industrializing, they haven't started it like 200 years ago like we did. Even though they had a slight boom in the 80s, guess what happened? At the end of the day, the marriage rate went down. It's waving down very rapidly, because it's almost in the last 30 years, it's been cut in half, and the divorce rate has more than doubled in 30 years. So that is a pattern of industrialization. This is something that was interesting to me. This is from 1960 to 2018. This is the formation of the population pyramid. You can see how it goes from this pre-industrial triangle almost, and as it industrializes and the numbers go up, the later we start to see the snow cone shape forming. This was what would normally happen if the governments didn't interfere and intercede special programs to induce women to have more babies. And these are the last sets of pyramids, right? Last set of pyramids I'm going to show you. Okay. Even though France is in the middle, even though it's at 60%, but look at the shape of the pyramid. This is the rounded shape or the square shape that you want. Sweden, France, the UK. The UK is 50% out of wedlock. France is 60. Sweden is 56. or 57, depending on what it is today. I was trying to find updated charts and figures for these, but for whatever reason, they're not publishing them. Maybe uppity Negroes like me are actually using this as evidence. But you notice the shape, similar shape amongst all three. Guess what you're going to find with the ones with low out of wedlock birth rates? Can you guess? Can you guess? Can you guess? Anybody? Bueller? 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 Yep. Greece is probably about between 6 and 8%. South Korea is 3%. Japan is 3%. Notice the shapes. Notice the cone. Notice the head of the ice cream on top, which is rounded, and the narrowing cone down here. This is the declining birth rate. It's a little less exaggerated in South Korea because they didn't industrialize at the same time. And the same thing with Japan. Notice the snow cone shape. And all three. 3%, 3%, 6%. And I've looked at a few others, and basically just by the population pyramids, you can pretty much tell what the governments are trying to do with incentivizing births. They're trying to correct what's going on in the environment. In the industrialized environment, post-industrialized environment, they're trying to keep their populations from declining. What Carol Quigley says, a rising population will actually overtake a declining one. You're kind of seeing that in Europe right now is the populations are slowly becoming non-white. You see it in the United States. They say that the last majority white population was born like 20 years ago. All the babies thereafter are basically non-white or considered non-white. And with the older folks dying and some of the males actually committing suicide at rates that are kind of alarming, that's accelerating it. But there's a very good reason why Western countries are doing something. And it's not simply just dysfunction of black people. Okay. I always say that culture is shaped by the environment, and it's up to each particular society and their culture to actually battle against it. There's something that I think me and Nicole were actually talking about, which is mouse utopia, which is why they did these studies, to actually find out what happens when you put a group of mice in an urban setting in a post-industrial society where they could get all they wanted to eat, get rid of all the predators, get rid of all the diseases, actually see exactly what happened in a population. And they use mice to simulate it. And basically what they're finding out is that people in the same environment are actually acting eerily similar to the mouse in Mouse Utopia, including the beautiful ones. They groomed themselves and didn't interact with females, just like the grass eaters in Japan, and almost like with the so-called incels, the incel culture here in the United States. Very interesting. But this will serve as my argument about the black single mother problem. It's bigger than you think. It's more an effect of our post-industrial environment than it is necessarily the dysfunction of black females. And God knows black females have enough dysfunction without all this stuff. But she is not the cause, she's an effect. And this will serve notice as my argument against that particular assertion. And for the most part, I think I have proven it. If there's any pushback, you're welcome to come on. If it's respectful in the comment section, I'll leave it up. If it's not, you guys go sideways. Guess what you're going to get? Sent to the curb, and along with the rocks to kick. When I put you on the curb, I always put rocks out there for you to kick, so you don't get bored out there. But anyway, that's all I got. Comment, share, subscribe, whatever. Hit the Cash App if you feel so inclined, because this is, I do believe this is scholarly work. It's something that most people don't look at least most people that are outside the ivory towers. In fact, I've never heard anybody inside the ivory towers actually talk about this. Probably because it's in a governmental agency, and they probably pay the guys not to say anything. But we have no such compunctions here on Black YouTube in the Igmore section. And trust me and believe, don't make me whip out these charts on you Negroes, all right? With that, I'm going to jump off here. This is BGS out, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.